Welcome to the Parenting Then and Now podcast, the show that remembers the good and sometimes the not so good old days of parenting past. I'm your host, Samantha Kemp-Jackson from the Multiple Mayhem Mama blog, and every week we'll be talking about how things were then and how they are now, parenting through the lens of the ages, if you will. Now, whether you're a parent, a kid, or someone who used to be a kid, you'll want to stay tuned as we reminisce about the past, embrace the future, and marvel in the present how things have changed. If you're ready to glance back in time at kids, parenting, and the good old days, you're in the right place. So sit back, relax, and let's take a trip down parenting's memory lane. I hope you enjoyed this episode. The world wasn't your oyster if you were a woman in the 1950s. Such was the case for Natasha Solovieff's mother, whose career frustration was typical of the times. Though she enjoyed her role as a nurse, her mom's desire to reach beyond the prescribed gender roles was palpable to a young Natasha. The young girl followed in her mother's footsteps when it was time to choose a career, but her abilities and options in life were much broader than that of her mother, and even more so still for Natasha's daughter. On this episode of the Parenting Then and Now podcast, we speak with the creator of OMG Parenting about growing up during the 50s and 60s, the life choices and decisions that informed her life's work, her perspective on the changes in how new parents embrace their roles, and much, much more. Here's our interview. So welcome to the Parenting Then and Now podcast. Natasha, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It's so great.
Up then and now.
Finally, I know that we've been going back and forth for a while, and it's always a challenge trying to connect our schedules. So I really appreciate the time that you've taken to be on the show with me today. So Natasha, as you know, the basic theme for my show is something that I've been interested in for some time, more specifically since I've had all these kids over all these many years. And you and I have something in common in that we've seen the changes in childhood and parenting shift as our cultural and societal mores shifted as well. So before we kind of get into some of the specifics, can you give my listeners a little bit of background in terms of, how you came to be the parenting aficionado that you are? I know you've got a great site, OMG Parenting or Oh My God Parenting. But can you give a little bit of background in terms of where and how you grew up, your family dynamics, and where you're at today?
It all started actually back in the 1950s. And so I've been through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, lots and lots and lots of change.
Love it.
And I grew up on the East Coast of the USA, originally in New York and then in Massachusetts, and now I'm out here in Minnesota. And I think my interest in parenting started when I was very, very young, and I experienced my own family's dynamics. And so I've been thinking about cause and effect, if you will, in family relationships for quite a long time, even though I didn't really have my own child until a little bit later in life. So I'm that older mom. Well, there are advantages to that.
Oh, absolutely.
I've had friends say to me when my child was a baby, that you're so relaxed about so many things. And as they would think about it, they'd say, oh, I think I was just so busy growing myself up that to grow my baby and myself, there was just a lot I didn't notice in my baby.
That's a great answer. And you're right, because I think with age comes a bit of clarity and wisdom and maturity, and realizing that the things that we thought were really important when we were younger really aren't. I'm realizing that now myself.
Yes, that's a gradual unfolding, just I think throughout life. We get to keep liberating.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the way I look at it.
So now, just going back to your childhood, so what was your family dynamic like? So you said it was in the 1950s. Did you have siblings? Did your parents, work outside the home? Did your mom stay at home? What was it like?
I have a brother and two sisters, two of them older than me, and one of them younger than me. And golly, what was it? It was many different things. When I was very, very young, my mom was working. And then I think with 3 children at that point, just thought, well, this is a bit much. My dad was working. So I grew up with both parents working and then just one parent working. And I think, God, is there an easy way to sum up family dynamics?
No, there probably isn't.
It was very loving in a lot of ways and very interesting because we were in New York City a lot and we lived on Long Island. So we were by all these great bodies of salt water and just a lot of playfulness. And it was very difficult also because that was a time in life when women, I think, were just on the cusp of feeling the constraints they had in life. And my mom definitely experienced those constraints. So all the ripple effect of that was also a part of our family.
So now, are you referring, Natasha, to the cultural, social mores of the 1950s, whereby women were expected, for the large part, to stay at home and take care of kids, and the men were expected to go out and work? And that being said, we all know that a lot of women were feeling unfulfilled in their personal lives because, as wonderful as it is to be a parent or a mother, people want to have other things in their life. Is that what was happening with your mom?
Yes, I think that was part of it. And the other thing that goes with what you just described is not only were women supposed to be at home, but they were supposed to enjoy it.
Yeah.
It was not supposed to be an experience where there was a range of feeling about it. And that's something, when I think about something that's changed, that has changed tremendously. Thank goodness. So it was constraining in terms of how women, the choices they had in using their intellect or their creativity, but also in their emotional expression of their experience.
Well, yeah, because I would think that would make women in this situation feel very probably resentful in some ways, probably silenced in some ways, probably not feeling like they were not heard. And I'd be interested to hear, in your particular family dynamic, how that manifested itself with your mom, because you said, starting off with this conversation, that you felt that she did feel this kind of pull towards something else, but because of the expectations, she wasn't able to realize what she probably wanted to do. So how did that manifest in terms of her parenting? Did that make her, a more engaged parent and a hands-on parent? Did it make her maybe more distant? And this isn't any way of saying negative things about your mother. I'm just more curious about how, because I think that this was probably a common feeling for a lot of women during the time in the 1950s, just based on what I've read and who I've spoken with.
Definitely. I think it was a bit of a lot of things. So in part, because she was an educated woman, I think she was very involved in our education, and she was very encouraging about our learning. I still remember being young and I could not understand why 2 + 2 was 4. And I just kept saying, why? And I can just remember her laughing and saying, oh, some things you just have to accept, Natasha. But she was very involved. She was the one that would quiz us before a test, would ask about what we're reading about, looked at our papers, expressed pride in what we were doing. The part of her that was more frustrated, I think, was in the expression of her greater worldview.
Yeah.
She was a nurse by training and had been in a supervisory role. In fact, I had worked as a nurse's aide in the hospital where she worked, and I knew some people that knew her. And she was very well regarded, which was fascinating as a teenager to discover about your mother.
Yes. So you saw this as the role model for what you would or maybe would not become as a woman, because we always look to our parents as our first kind of role model for each sex, I guess. So how did your experience growing up with her and your siblings manifest itself in the 1960s? Because you said in the 1950s you were kids. In the 1960s, there were a lot of changes in society with respect to social and cultural expectations of women, feminism, the women's movement, the introduction of the birth control pill, which gave women a lot more kind of sexual freedom.
The Beatles arrived.
There was Woodstock. All kinds of things were happening. So I think that probably would have been an exciting time to be coming into your own as a young woman. What did that do in terms of your trajectory with respect to your career?
I am so glad I grew up when I grew up. Yeah, it was a very forceful time, very powerful time for someone my age and people in my peer group to be in your late teens, your early 20s. You're thinking about, who am I? What is my womanhood about? And women have thought about that through the ages, even when they haven't been able to express much about it. So here we were at this time when we could start saying things about it, and we could start being rebellious. We could start saying, no, I don't want to be barefoot and pregnant. I want more options than being a teacher or being a nurse. And even though I chose nursing, in fact, I had other options that I could have pursued. So I think it 100% affected me, to answer your question.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, all these questions were being put out to women about what our rights were, about what sex was for us, about what pregnancy was for us. Moving forward a little bit, when I worked in postpartum and labor and delivery in the 70s and 80s, that was just the transition where women started to have a choice to not be medicated for birthing and to maybe go natural if their doctor was in agreement with that. So, I mean, the forces were just powerful about women's voices. And
well, it sounded like, what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like, first of all, let me just say, I love nurses. Nursing is such an honorable profession. And a lovely nurse, which most of them have been, in my experience, dealing with medicine, makes a huge difference towards recovery. I think a lot of it is psychological, and just having a kind person there who is caring and loves their profession makes a huge difference. But anyway, that's my little thing. But nursing, so even though you chose nursing, which was the profession of your mother, you had the choice of going down that path, whereby it sounds like your mother had a couple of choices and that was basically it. Is that the case? Yeah.
And that was standard at that point in time for women. Women weren't thinking about going out and being engineers and architects and astronauts. Well, of course, we weren't being astronauts then, but they weren't hardly even thinking about being doctors or dentists, definitely not thinking about being lawyers. It was still the joke that you went to college to get your MRS.
Yes, I've heard that before, too. Strange.
I definitely didn't go to college to get my MRS. I went because I wanted to travel, and I was very interested in the human body. I knew I didn't love education enough to be a doctor because I just couldn't do that much schooling, and I couldn't do all those big, huge words forever. So nursing just seemed to fulfill my interest in the human body and anatomy and physiology. And I was very interested in the human spirit, which I saw nursing interacting with that more than what I saw of doctors. And it would support me traveling. I could kind of go anywhere, and there was always a need for a nurse. So that's kind of what the pot of thought that came together and sent me off on my nursing years. Yeah. And then I've always loved children. I've always loved the phenomena of birth. So I always worked in maternal child health, all kinds of areas in maternal child health.
Now, that's really interesting to me because I'm sure that you have a lot of stories, but B, you've probably seen a lot of shifts towards a different paradigm of parenting from when you were a child and a young woman to later on in your career as a nurse. Because even in my lifetime, I have seen a shift in terms of what people expect out of parents, both mothers and fathers. As well, we've also seen a divergence in the family unit. So now we've got same-sex families. We've got families with two dads and two moms and kids. We see, which I think is fantastic. I think it's great that we've expanded our abilities to embrace all types of family structures that provide love and a loving support foundation for children. But talk to me a little bit about so what you've seen in terms of those parental expectations and roles as they relate to you as a maternity and infant-related nurse during the 60s and 70s, and I guess 80s too?
Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. Well, I wasn't a nurse in the 60s.
Or no, 70s, I guess.
It started kind of mid-70s. So it was really 70s, 80s, and then on. God, the changes are enormous. Some of it's what you just described, the family unit itself. Who can be considered a family has opened up a lot. I think just the whole experience of pregnancy has opened up. I'll add to the list of what you were describing, teen pregnancy. I mean, we used to tuck our teens that got pregnant away somewhere and try to hide it. And now I'm not recommending the teens go out and get pregnant. But when teen families really support their teens, everything works out okay. Yeah. In fact, sometimes teenagers actually pull their lives together when they get pregnant because they have a purpose beyond themselves. So, but that whole around a teen getting pregnant and the shame of it has lessened a lot. I think perhaps in individual families, that's not always the case, but by and large, the shame around it has lessened. Women go about pregnancy very differently now than they used to.
How so?
They are more learned about it. I mean, you have apps galore that will tell you what's going on with fetal development. So the whole science, the whole neonatal science area has really expanded. And we know so much more about what's happening intrauterine. And women are really tuned into that through their apps or through books, through asking questions they want to know. What's happening with my 6-month little baby inside there? They want to know gender. They want to know it at 5 months, by and large, not always. That 5-month ultrasound that reveals the gender. And that's something that never used to happen, always used to be once the baby's born. So there's that whole involvement between a mom and a fetus, use a technical term, during pregnancy. Fetus just means unborn baby. There's an involvement, there's an engagement and interaction. And actually, a lot of men are more involved also. And what I hear about that 5-month ultrasound and knowing the gender is a lot of men will say, well, it really helped me bond in advance of the baby being born.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a little less mystery, and yet it's still very mysterious to people. In some ways, people honor the mystery a little bit more because of all the knowledge we can access about what's happening within our uterus as that baby's growing.
Right. When would you say that you started to really see a shift in this type of attitude with respect to men being more involved and also women taking a little bit more control in terms of what was happening with them?
Well, I think we stepped into it in the early 80s, and then it just intensified. And I can't say that men were very involved at that point. But, it all has to start somewhere. So it started with women rattling the bushes, so to speak, about how do we think about this. And probably late 90s, it really was changing, and the men were getting more involved and there for the delivery. That was one of the big concrete signs of it changing, was men being in the delivery room, which was just not happening before, not that long ago.
Really?
We're talking late 80s. It wasn't real common for men to be in the delivery room. I don't know, all those pictures of them smoking a cigar, pacing in the waiting area, that was definitely reality.
And I think probably, the shift in terms of men really seeing what it was all about, not just seeing their partner go in pregnant and come out with a nice baby, but actually seeing the reality of what childbirth can be, whether it's through a C-section, whether it's, a high risk pregnancy, whether it's, whatever. I think that probably opened the eyes of many men who didn't realize the extent to which, giving birth affects both the mother, the child, and the father as well, or the other mother. So you saw changes then. What would you say was what came out of that was positive, do you think?
I think a lot of things. I think the fact that for women, they have a lot more choice now about how they go about delivery. They have more company in the process of being pregnant. It's not just a woman's thing. It's something you share more with your partner. You are going to be less isolated, like after the birth, during the birth, because you have somebody tracking along with you and being there with you and enthusiastic with you. So I think it's reduced some of that isolation that women can feel. Although I still hear a lot about that, but I think that's something else. I think for men, it's just been this gradual relief for them that they get to actively parent and that they don't have to be remote like their dads were. So it's a way of almost redadding themselves, depending what their age is. Probably 20-year-old dads might be feeling a little bit less of that because their dads were probably more involved than if you're like a 40-year-old father.
Right.
That the grandfather might not have been as actively involved. So I hear relief. I hear couples feeling like they have more choices when it comes to their finances. In the USA, we have probably, I think the last I read was over 1.5 million stay-at-home dads.
Oh, wow.
So couples are making choices based on who's the best person for being at home, who's got the most patience, who can do that, and it's probably predominantly, who's the best breadwinner.
Yeah.
So it's opened that decision-making process about how to support the children, how to support the whole family.
And it is all about choice, though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, back in the day in the 50s and 60s, for some of the part, it was about what was expected. So it was a fait accompli that women were going to have babies and stay at home, and men were going to go out and work, and that was going to be it, and end of story. Whereas today, there is, a range of choice for women and men with respect to who and what is going to make the difference in terms of who's taking care of the kids. So a lot of times it is just financial. Who's making more money? Who can support, the family? Sometimes it's more career driven. So maybe, somebody has, maybe somebody's at a certain point in their career where they say, I think right now I need to still keep on that track. Can you stay home with the baby? So I think it's great that there's more choice overall for men and women, as opposed to there just being these very strict didactic rules whereby it's expected that women are going to do one thing and men are going to do another.
Right. I think the challenge of that is a lot of times for couples, when you start out as a partner, whether you're married or not, when you wind up pregnant, you think about a bunch of stuff that you didn't think about when you were not having a child together. And so to talk about that stuff is today's challenge. It's like, have the conversation.
Yeah.
How we're going to support this family, who's going to work, who isn't going to work, who's changing diapers, who's feeding, who's doing the laundry, who's doing the clinic appointments, all of that just really needs to be, the nitty gritty needs to get worked out. And that I think I see it as a challenge. Couples arrive with this baby and they're like, oh my God, we didn't know we had to think about this stuff. We didn't know how tiring this was going to be. We didn't know you had a different point of view about vaccines than I have. We didn't know that you sleep through the night even when the baby's crying and I don't. Just so much that comes up.
Yeah.
And we have the luxury of talking, and we have the luxury of giving voice to what we want as women now, but it also makes it more challenging because we have to speak our voice, and sometimes that creates conflict.
Yeah, I guess it's the flip side of having choice, right? So, we were just talking a few minutes ago about how great it is that, we can decide and we can choose who's going to do what. Whereas when we had the prescribed roles as per society, we might not have liked it, but we knew what we were expected to do, right?
Yes, we did. And now, say you're at delivery and you're hearing about some risk variables going on. Both of you are reacting. So it's not just one of you, it's both of you. And everybody's point of view has to come to play. Doesn't matter what the dialogue is. As soon as you open it, then you have to stand in it.
Yeah.
I like to talk with women about finding their voice in that context. And I hear more from men about finding their voice around all of this.
And I want to talk to you more about that because I know that that's a large part of what you do in terms of helping parents and couples and counseling them in terms of, their expectations of family life. But before I get into that, Natasha, what I want to ask you is about your journey as a parent.
Well, I had a couple miscarriages, and then I had 3 pregnancies. 2 were miscarriages, and 1 was obviously a child. And I had her. I was actually 41 when I had her, and I had been working in maternal child health for a really long time. I was in great shape. I had traveled a lot. I had sowed my oats, so to speak. So I was very ready to have a child. I was blessed with an incredibly easy pregnancy that made the transition into motherhood easier for me.
As somebody who's had a child later, so I was in my early 40s as well with my last 2, my twins, and people say, oh my goodness, like that's old and da 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 da. But I think that there is something that comes with age that you don't have when you're younger. So I've had children when I was younger. I had children when I was older. Younger, I had more energy and it was lots of fun, but I didn't have the money or the wisdom or the maturity. And then, when I was older, I definitely had more wisdom, more maturity, more money, but I was darn tired. So you trade off somewhere, right?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a limit to the age, although I think there are some women out there pushing it. But I look at moms now, who have toddlers, and I think, oh, my God, how did I get through it?
Yeah. Well, they say it's the longest, shortest time, right? So when you're in the trenches, you're thinking, holy smokes, am I ever going to get out of this? And then you look back and your child is an adult. I mean, my oldest is an adult. And I look back and I say, where did the years go? Right. Yeah.
Then we look at ourselves and we know where they went.
Exactly. So when you were raising your daughter, how So to that point, so now you've become a mom, you had 41 years to live. And I mean, what a gift that is, because,
Yes.
you got to kind of do all the things you wanted to do. You built your career, you probably traveled. You said you lived in different places. So when you arrived, not arove, no such word, when you arrived at motherhood at 41, what was your perspective in terms of how you were going to parent? And how did that perspective marry with what you had seen from your own childhood and what you were seeing as a nurse with maternity-related patients?
Okay, good question. And I just want to say that I think everybody, doesn't matter who you are, when you enter parenting, you think, what do I want to bring into my family life that I had in my early family life, and I liked it, and I want to continue that. And you think, what do I want to do differently? I think that's something it's on our minds. I like to make it intentionally on people's mind because it shapes a lot. So when I became a parent, I knew I was bringing her up at a very different time. So I wasn't like training her to be this person or that person. I entered it with the idea that we're going to discover who she is.
Mm-hmm.
And even though she's mine, she felt kind of separate from me also. I saw her as a separate little human being that I didn't know, and we were going to find out kind of together who she is. I set forth with that. Still, though, it was like a joy like I haven't experienced before. And I know that sounds so Pollyanna-ish.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because you know what? I think anyone or everyone who has a child or who has been fortunate enough to have a child, there is that wonder about it that you kind of can't explain it,
Yeah. And then I think because I had been making things happen and goal oriented, all of a sudden here I was with this baby who brought me back to here and now. It's like when the walking started and noticing everything on the ground, and all of a sudden you're noticing with renewed interest what ants are like.
So in other words, you're kind of seeing your life through the eyes of a child, as they say, right?
Yes. And that was really good because there's a lot of stress reduction in that. And then that opened myself to this whole idea of more mindful living, even separate from being a parent. I think, I cued in because of my experiences traveling. She's been interested in traveling since she was knee-high to a grasshopper, and she did some pretty incredible traveling even in her high school years. So because of my experience traveling, I was open to that with her.
Did you travel with her?
I traveled some with her, and she traveled independent.
Okay.
The first time she went on an airplane, she was 6 weeks old. I had to travel for work, and I brought her along with me because I had somebody who could take care of her on the other end. So yeah, she's been hoofing it to the airport for quite a while. And then she traveled independently, some in her later high school years and subsequently. Just my love of knowing the world and seeing the world, I was able to share that with her. And I was able to support her in it from experience. I also entered it with a lot of curiosity about what was it going to be like to be a young female now?
Yeah.
What was it like to be a young male now? So I was really interested in all the kids that were just always around, and how they were doing their gender stuff. It was interesting.
What did you find and what did you see? More
openness. And there's even more now than there was then. So more openness, and yet some of the same kind of, it was almost disturbing to me. Boys are different than girls. Girls are different than boys. There just are some things that by and large you could say wind up being different. And again, that's not every boy and girl. Mm-hmm. Girls gravitate towards collaborative play. They just do. Boys laugh off stuff the girls can't laugh off.
And I think we find that as adult women and men too. Many would say.
I think so too. And we know that actually male and female brains are wired differently. There's this great research that was done on, give a man and a woman the same problem. And PET scans were done on all these brains. When a guy sees a problem, it tracks through his brain in kind of a path. A female sees a problem and all these parts of the brain light up.
Yeah.
It just networks. The brain networks.
Yeah.
So we know that there are some functional differences between male and female brain. But I didn't know that when my child was young. I just observed this stuff and I thought, I just didn't quite know what to make of it.
Yeah. No.
She didn't want to trucks.
What's that?
I said she didn't want to play with trucks.
Yeah, no, and some kids do and some kids don't, right? That's the beauty of having this little independent person who grows into, whoever they're supposed to be. And it sounds like you were open to learning who she was going to be as opposed to trying to impose who she should be, which might have been the case back in the 1950s, but not so much today, which is great.
I think it's a struggle. It comes out in those parenting styles where we talk about being autocratic or authoritative. And it used to be mostly autocratic.
Yeah.
And now we reach for authoritative, and then we talk about attachment, and it's just a whole different world when we talk about what supports a human being growing up to be confident in themselves and contributing to the world.
So what I want to know now, Natasha, is how did you get into what you're doing now in terms of helping families and parents with parenting related issues and challenges that they might be experiencing?
Well, I started thinking about what do I want to leave behind when I am no more? And it just looped right back into my early love for child development. Put that together with all the things I observed about other children and their family dynamics. And it all came to a head when I was at a professional conference and when I had started blogging about parenting at that point. And when people heard what I was doing, I started hearing all these parenting stories. And I realized that a lot of moms are just feeling so much guilt and worry. And I had worries. I didn't have a lot of guilt. But I felt more upbeat about my parenting experience. And a lot of people seem to be kind of suffering with it. So that led me to, how do you do this thing called love your child and not suffer? How do you do it and thrive in it? And one thing led to another. And that led to my book, The Dance of Parenting, all that kind of thought. And, influences what I write about it in my blogs. So, and what I hone in with parents on, because I don't want parents to be suffering. It doesn't have to be this big suffering. And yes, there's going to be worry. Yes, there's going to be times when you feel a little guilty, like I didn't handle that very well. Yes, there's going to be times when you have to rethink and you're going to wonder, am I a good parent or not? But that doesn't have to be your dominant emotional position. It's really possible to feel good about your parenting. It's really possible to get off course for a bit and then get back on course. But as I thought about what is it that gets us into this guilt and shame and how does that happen? And I realized there's certain pitfalls we can fall into as a parent, and worry is one of them. And it's easy to say, well, of course I worry. I'm a parent. I love my child. But there's worry and there's toxic worry. And I still see a lot of moms kind of in toxic worry, to tell you the truth. There's wondering, there's having doubt. Doubt, it's going to be normal. We can't do anything important without having doubt about ourselves in it. But it's what we do with that doubt. And a lot of times when moms get doubtful, they do one of two things. They either get aggressive about their parenting or they do the opposite. They get kind of silent about it and they withdraw. So I don't know. I've been living in counterculture for a while. That's how the 60s and 70s influenced me. So I thought, well, I want to counter that. I want to counter that for moms. I want moms to be having a more pleasant experience. I want them to have their off moments feel like, well, yes, that's going to happen, where you can be self-forgiving of it and you can make it right. You can get back on course. So I set out to counter what I saw, all this guilt and all the shame that moms experience.
And I'm sure that you're realizing as well in your practice that it's not just moms, right?
Right. I focus mostly on moms just because I am a mom. I'm a woman. But you can hear, I'm starting to hear some of the same stuff from dads, which is interesting. So it's just parenting maybe that does that to people.
Yeah. And the expectations of society, which there always are those expectations. They've changed since you and I were children, but they're there nonetheless, right?
Yes. And we are greatly influenced by the culture around us, whether it's national culture, state culture, local community culture, or just our own family's culture. We're very influenced by it. So it's best to become aware of that. Mm-hmm. And then to get intentional around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what would you say? I'm gonna wrap it up, but I want to ask you, what would be, your, best one or two pieces of advice for parents who are perhaps struggling somewhat, who are perhaps feeling guilty, as you mentioned, or who are worrying, or who are feeling that they're not up to speed in terms of where their parenting game is at? What would you say to them?
Well, first I'd say go buy my book.
Yes, and I will link to it in the show notes.
It will give you a place to go with all that, a positive place to go with all that. I would say good for you for noticing it. Naming it is the beginning of taming it. So becoming aware of it. And then I would say to work on having some self-compassion. I know that sounds very abstract, but the key question for parents is, if your kid was coming to you, saying to you what you're saying to me, what would you say to your child?
Yeah.
So ask yourself that question because you love your child. So ask yourself that question. What would I say to my child who is presenting me with this doubt or this worry or this whatever? How would I truly help them come to peace with that inside? And then set out and do that.
Yeah. And I would say, and I'm sure that you would agree, just to be kind to yourself, because sometimes I think we're not as kind to ourselves as we are to other people.
Right. And that's what I mean by self-compassion. We offer, especially when we hear somebody's story, we offer them more understanding. So maybe and of course I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling this way because I grew up with blah, 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 and I didn't want to see that now. So of course I'm feeling worried. Or this feels out of my control. So of course I'm feeling worried. So offering, yes, kindness. Knowing that you get to do it differently tomorrow.
Yeah, I love that. Tomorrow is a new day, right?
It is a new day. And sometimes you can start that at bedtime. Sometimes not. Sometimes you need to get on your bed and your head needs to be on your pillow so you can think through this stuff. And tomorrow is a new day. And children are so forgiving. And that's, again, people have said that. And I don't say that as a way of saying, shove it under the carpet. You don't have to deal with it. I say that as when you bring it out to them and when you say to them, I'm so sorry I yelled like that at you, when it had nothing to do with you. I was in fact frustrated about something over here. Or I'm so sorry I yelled at you like that. It's because I get really concerned and it makes me afraid when I see blah, 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 blah. Children understand.
And so on that note, can you tell everybody where we can find you online and your book and every other social media place that people can connect with you?
Yeah. And actually you could get all that information at the website at omgparenting.com. Dance of Parenting, there's a tab for that, and you can see where you can purchase it. Any classes I have and other services I provide are listed there. You can find me on Twitter at OParenting. And you can find me on Facebook at OMG Parenting.
And I will put all of those links on the site and we'll share it on social. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show today, Natasha. It's been so lovely speaking with you and hearing about your experiences and your perspective on parenting and how it's changed over the many years.
Yeah, so it was fun, Samantha, which I knew it would be because all of your podcasts are just fun to listen to.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, what an interesting conversation with Natasha. Her experience as a child of the 50s and a woman coming of age in the 60s gave her a unique perspective on parenting. Living through such major societal shifts as feminism and the redefinition of women's roles in the 70s allowed her to actively choose her profession as a nurse. Her decision to become a mother at a later age was made without the pressures and expectations of earlier eras. This, luckily for her, and even more so for her daughter, who reaped the benefits of having a mom who taught her child that she could be anything and everything she ever wanted to be. Thanks for being on the show, Natasha, and for sharing your life experience with the Parenting Then and Now podcast.